Kitco News' special coverage of the Future Blockchain Summit is brought to you by Coin Payments, crypto payments made easy.
I'm here with Ralph Simon, Chief Executive of Mobilium Global, and we're talking about the most significant technological developments happening this decade. Welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you. It's good to see you again in Dubai.
Thank you, David. Great to be back here with you at this GITEX, this really remarkable large gathering, which they say now exceeds the pull of the Consumer Electronics Show in America.
No way. Well, I certainly believe that just based on what I've seen. I will ask you about what you've seen and what you've learned at the conference. Now, you are popularly known as the father of the ringtone. This is the story there, but we'll get to that. I want to first talk about all the projects you're involved in, but before that, what do you think, as I've said in my intro, what do you think are the most significant changes or developments in the technology space right now? I know that's a very broad question. So many facets of technology we can talk about, but what's really driving society today?
I think one of the big issues and drivers is the emergence of the commercial blockchain, because it's going to really result in a lot of further progressive technological development. Secondly, the rise of quantum computing, because there's a need for really enhancing the data construction, architectural capabilities of the internet and its wider reach. And then, of course, the other big thing, certainly here in Dubai and also internationally, is the emergence of the various elements of the Metaverse.
We are going to talk about the Metaverse. Now, you've worked in both the music and mobile telecom industries. Let's just talk about those two industries first. How have they evolved over the last few decades? And in terms of technological integration and development, how are these two industries going to evolve in the coming decades?
So the most fundamental change in music, the last 8 years, I would say, is the ubiquity of streaming, Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music. What it's done, it's brought an enormous welter of profitability to the major record companies, the major independent companies, because, of course, people's tastes and their whole basis of enjoying music is now streaming. Streaming is the dominant global platform. And if you look at something like Spotify that have nearly 300 million plus users, streaming is something that's also breeding regular revenue development for all of the music companies. So that's been a massive change. Yeah. From a telco perspective, you're seeing the continued use of mobile technology in all aspects of modern life. WhatsApp has been an absolute game changer. When Mark Zuckerberg paid $19 billion to buy WhatsApp from a former Ukrainian called Jan Koum, people couldn't believe that he was paying that amount of money some 8, 9, 10 years ago. But of course, WhatsApp drives so much of voice traffic, and that's been something that's made telcos around the world really reevaluate voice traffic and try and find other ways to have data that pays for itself on telcos.
Okay, in terms of advancements, what's next for telco?
Some new advancements in mobile devices and in mobile technologies. Lots of artificial intelligence and smarter devices that can understand and predetermine what you're going to do, think, or perhaps need to have. So you're seeing the much more sophisticated device that anticipates what you might want to do. It sounds strange, but it's true.
Anticipate what you want to do. Can you describe that for us? What does that mean in practical application terms?
Let's say, for example, you've got certain shopping patterns.
Yes.
And let's say, for example, you are in a city and you go near a certain store that you've been at, or where you might have searched for something online. Your phone would then ping you to be able to say, you looked for such and such 3 days ago, you're now in the vicinity of this particular store. It's very basic Shopify on your phone.
Yeah, okay. Now, how does the Metaverse fit into all this?
Well, the Metaverse is an interesting new category because a lot of the broad general public are not really fully familiar with what the Metaverse is, does, or stands for. The Metaverse is really quite a broad array of ways in which you can develop and work within different worlds. Give you 3 examples. Let's say, for example, you want to buy a car, but you don't want to have to go to a car lot to see a car. You can do the entire thing on your phone, and you could experience the 3D implementation of a car that you might want to buy or test or try. Let's say, for example, you wanted to get furniture for your home or find a way of completely redoing or decorating the space within which you live. You can go into a metaverse that creates what you're doing. This is not new technology, but the metaverse actually makes it so. And then for me, on a personal and professional level, the most important part of the metaverse is in terms of esports and video games. Because today, video games is 5 to 6 times bigger than the combined movie, music, and television business worldwide.
Okay, let's talk about that. So your projects and involvements in the video game space. Now, one could argue that the video game space has created the metaverse in some way. Even before blockchain technology was popularized, we had games online where you had a avatar, you were role-playing some avatar in an online multiplayer environment. Granted, maybe VR headsets weren't invented back in the late, weren't commercialized back in the late 90s, but these games have been around for a while, Ralph.
They have been around for a while. One of the developments was a company called Roblox, which is an American company, really started to commercialize a metaverse as such, where you could, as a kid, make your own game. But there's a much more interesting, more complex kind of array of worlds and metaverses that you can be in. There's one interesting company in Los Angeles called XLA that have actually come up with about 700 different ways to monetize the purchase of digital goods within games, which is a massive subset of the video game experience, where you buy digital products within games that are basically virtual, but the way to pay for them and acquire them and collect them and so forth is a whole new subset that is a driver under the hood of the games and incredibly popular.
Okay. And now, in terms of the development of the metaverse with video games, what is next for hardware? People talk about VR headsets. What else?
There's been a big drive by the technology companies, like, for example, Facebook bought Oculus, of having a headset and it's connected to a computer or a device. There is a general feeling that having a headset takes you away from having a communal experience. It's a very solitary experience that you have with the headset on your head. There's now new technology developments where, with the development of 3D on your phone in the metaverse, you would be able to experience a very, very interesting, tangible metaverse on your iOS phone, your Apple phone, or on your other devices, where you'd actually be able to experience the metaverse on your device.
So I take out my phone.
Correct.
And then what happens?
You would be able to get into the metaverse that you had chosen, but because of the 3D nature of the software technologies within it, it'll give you a very interesting 3D.
I don't have to wear
experience.
3D goggles?
No, you don't have to do that.
Is this a holographic projection, Ralph? I'm trying to understand.
It's kind of like a holographic projection on Android and iOS.
Cool.
It's a whole new development of some new technology that's just recently come forth in
When are we
Korea.
going to see this?
It's now just starting to be tested with seriousness, and over the course of the next 2-3 months, you'll start seeing the first iterations of this coming through from one particular company from Korea. Very interesting.
Very interesting indeed. Okay, so you've interviewed a lot of people here yourself. You've done
You
panels.
mean here at GITEX?
At the GITEX conference, yes. Biggest themes that you've accumulated through the panels that you've moderated and the interviews you've done. What have you learned so far at this conference?
I interviewed some of the leaders of the telco industry, particularly the chief executive of Etisalat, which is the biggest of the UAE and Middle East telcos, 16 countries, 160 plus million subscribers. And what you're finding is that they are giving a focus onto something called the connective harmonization of the subscribers' usage. They don't even like to talk about having subscribers anymore. They talk about connectivity as being their goal, and they look at things like connectivity in life. Life is broad, life has got many interests, to connect in many different areas in the life rather than just as a voice or in a traditional form of the use of the mobile phone. It's basically looking at ways in which the telco can become involved in many different aspects of what you do. Your health, your insurance, your recreational experiences of having the phone in a much, much more pervasive, but in a good way, part of your life.
Okay. And do you think that this coming recession, people are talking about a global slowdown, will significantly impact technological innovation in the spaces that we've discussed?
From what I can observe, innovation never stops. Whilst there obviously will be some slowdown in terms of funding, if you look at independent funding, particularly of the startup universes around the world, there doesn't seem to be a reduction in enthusiasm for that space. In all of these new areas, whether it's quantum, whether it's video games, whether it's a whole range of interesting mobile tech, I don't see any slowdown at all in that. The UK is still a leader in providing funding for all things mobile. Same, of course, in America, Silicon Valley, in Canada too, of course. But and in Asia, but there are, from a consumer standpoint, definitely some brakes on people's ability to spend. Inflation certainly is a beast that has to be cured.
Okay. Now, you've lived and worked through several recessions yourself. Does this one look any different to you?
I think this is quite dangerous because the inflation rates in the major G7 countries is higher than has been expected. Some say higher than in the last 37, 40 years.
Yes.
So it is an issue. And that coupled with some of the issues brought about by the conflict in Ukraine, food supply, although interestingly, the cost of basic food and grain is actually down over the last 3 or 4 months by, I don't know the exact numbers, but the key central banks and the G7 countries are, this is first and foremost the International Monetary Fund trying to staunch the impact of inflationary conditions which lead to financial insecurity.
Okay. I do have to ask you, going back to your moniker of the father of the ringtone, what's the story behind that? It's on the website of Mobilium Global.
The story is fundamentally going back to just before 2000. I was living in Santa Monica in California, and I found an incredible team of people that had created, I guess you could call it a piece of software that could basically take a piece of content, very early form of the SMS,
Yes.
and basically take a piece of music and send it from a telco to a handset. And I had to struggle to get the license from music publishers to use the rights to music that I could then use in this transport mechanism, so I could send a piece of music from a telco to a handset. It was a struggle for 2 or 3 years to get licenses. At one stage, we were sued by one of the big music publishing companies, EMI, who wanted to sue me personally for $45 million, same with the company. We managed to avert that and get the lawsuit set aside. And once we got permission from one publisher in particular that published the Beatles, Bryan Adams, a number of other key people, that was the gateway that opened up an opportunity for us to go to the rest of the publishers, get further licenses, and then with only 8 days of money left in our startup company, we got a contract to provide one of the biggest telcos in America, which is today AT&T, who decided they were going to take our ringtone platform as an exclusive platform to introduce ringtones to America.
Before then, it was just beeping, or what?
No, but before that, there wasn't an effective way that you could combine the technology and the copyright usage ability, the licensing ability together.
What's your favorite ringtone to date?
Well, if I could, my favorite ringtone today, I have to say, is an artist who is now managed by Quincy Jones. He lives in Los Angeles, but he's a young British man who, in my view, is the Mozart of the modern era. His name is Jacob Collier.
My idol as well.
Right? Well, Jacob Collier, to me, if I can choose any ringtone, I choose Jacob Collier. Or there is this extraordinary, unbelievable, incredible singer from Kazakhstan. Where's Kazakhstan? Central Asia.
Yes.
But this guy, whose name is Dimash Kudaibergen, has a voice and a falsetto that is just the best voice that I've ever heard or worked with.
I do want a perfect segue, Ralph. I'm a music aficionado with
There you
myself. We've talked about this offline.
Right.
I do want to end on music. You have been intimately involved with some of the most influential artists of all time. You have worked for Capitol Records, who have published some of the most influential artists of all time. Who, in your opinion, was the most memorable for you that you've ever worked with?
Most memorable from a musical perspective, I mean, there are various. I mean, I've always loved the Beastie Boys because I think they brought a modernity and a really interesting way to bridge the worlds of rap and modern styling. In terms of other people that I've worked with, I'm working presently with a young musical polymath from India, 17-year-old kid that plays 15 instruments. He's kind of like an Indian Jacob Collier.
Okay.
But I think if I go back, I mean, obviously experiences with the great Frank Sinatra, for one, was interesting. People like AC/DC were always incredible, hard-working, amazing musicians. But I always like to look at the modern sense of what's coming next. And this Kazakh guy that I was telling you about, Dimash Kudaibergen, is probably one of the best artists I've ever worked with. He plays incredible classical piano. He plays the dombra, which is a Kazakh stringed instrument.
Yeah.
And he has a musicality and a music sensibility that is the best that I've ever seen.
You know, speaking of technologies, we haven't really talked about the evolution of production. Frank Sinatra had to walk into a studio, have a huge team supporting him. Nowadays, Jacob Collier does everything in his bedroom by himself.
There's certainly been a democratization of production.
Yeah.
People have got software on the computers, and
Right.
of course this has also fueled a whole kind of democratic approach to production. And of course electronic dance music, 128 beats a minute.
Yes.
Many people say that has degraded the work of great songwriting, because songwriting, in a sense, there's more music but less great hits. There's an article in Billboard magazine, which is the Bible of the music industry. Just this week, where are we? We're in the last week of October.
Yeah.
Third week of October, middle of October, talking about how there's way more music, but far fewer great, memorable hits.
Because everything's diluted, or everything is just less
More mediocrity of songwriting.
mediocrity of songwriting. Okay.
I think it would be fair to say that.
You know, another interesting technological trend is the complete removal of the person behind the songwriting. I'm talking about AI. There's already some blockchain companies working on this. I've heard some of these tunes that these AIs have written, mostly in the EDM space. You know, they're able to replicate sound patterns from electronic music and recreate that. It sounds interesting. It sounds like something an EDM artist might create. Have you had a chance to listen to some of this?
I have, and in fact, at one stage we were looking at doing something with AI to try and replicate Mozart in Vienna, in the Vienna State Opera House,
Okay.
to try and get a new composition done of a Mozart symphony or Mozart opera. And it sounded, you could say that it sounded very similar. It wasn't the real deal. In terms of AI, just mimicking and doing something that is somewhat synthetic, I've always believed that true great art has to come from a human output. Because I think people ultimately understand and get to hear the emotional depth of what true art really brings. Doesn't mean to say that electronic art doesn't do that. I mean, Just think of the Kraftwerk, the famous group from Germany,
Yeah.
that really utilized computers and synthesizers in a very effective way, but that's 30, 40 years ago.
Right. I do agree with you that something that humans can do is understand how to emote sounds. In other words, create sounds that reflect an emotion. But you refer to yourself as a technopreneur.
Technopreneur, right.
Technopreneur. You've seen the evolution of technology. Could AI one day understand human emotions? And I don't even know what that means exactly, what I just said, but
I think it
could a
can-
computer understand sadness and write a minor chord, or understand
It
happiness
could certainly
and
write a
chord?
minor chord, and I think it could interpret sadness, but would you be able to get Adele by AI? I don't think so. Someone like Adele, who has been one of the biggest female artists in the world, actually since Carole King or Shania Twain. But you listen to Adele and listen to the way that music is made. It comes from the heart, the spirit, the soul. And I don't know, with AI, you can get an artificially constructed soulfulness, but I think you need that human touch.
Very deep. Final question, Ralph,
Yeah.
and I'll let you go. You've been a serial entrepreneur your whole life, very successful, built many great companies from the ground up. What's your one advice for a startup entrepreneur right now?
You know, they always say that in Silicon Valley, you've always got to concentrate on a service that is not yet provided or not sophisticated enough in its development to be provided to the public. I think that you've always got to be on the lookout for something that fills a particular need in modern life and modern society. And if you can find something like that, and you can find that there is a demand or a need or a market for it, that would be something that would give you confidence to be able to go and develop the funding for
What
it.
if that particular thing has already been found, but you just want to do it better?
That's also something that can always be a great move to get you going and get you started again.
All right. Ralph Simon, I appreciate your time as always.
David,
Great honor
it
to
was
have
a
you on
great
the
pleasure
show.
to talk with you, and great to be part of the whole Kitco News fabric.
Thank you. I hope to speak to you again soon. Keep in
We'll
touch.
be
And thank
back.
you for watching Kitco News in Dubai. Stay tuned for more.
Kitco News special coverage of the Future Blockchain Summit is brought to you by Coin Payments. Crypto payments made easy.